Rain hammered the glass doors of St. Perpetua Medical Center, streaking the reflections of red and blue lights that pulsed off the wet pavement outside. Inside, the emergency room hummed with its usual chaos, monitors beeping, a gurney rattling past, the tired fluorescent buzz overhead. Nobody paid attention to the woman in the maroon scrubs restocking a supply cart near Bay 6. Her name badge read M. Calloway, RN. And to the hospital staff who'd worked beside her for 3 years, that was all she'd ever been. Quiet, efficient. The nurse who never missed a shift and never said much about herself. Dr. Aldrich Voss, the ER's senior attending, barely glanced her way as he barked orders across the room. He'd once told a resident that Calloway was fine for triage, but don't expect initiative from her. He had no idea how wrong he was. Maren Calloway had spent 6 years before St. Perpetua as a combat medic attached to a classified Joint Special Operations Unit, the kind that didn't exist on paper and whose casualties were never reported by name. She had pulled men out of collapsed buildings in Kandahar, stabilized gunshot wounds in the back of blacked-out trucks doing 60 miles an hour, and once kept a team leader breathing for 11 minutes with nothing but a chest seal and her own hands pressed against a wound that should have killed him in 90 seconds. Her call sign back then was Ghost. Not because she was quiet, though she was, but because she had a habit of appearing exactly when someone was about to die and vanishing before anyone could thank her properly. When her contract ended and the unit was quietly folded into something else, she disappeared into civilian life the same way she'd operated in the field. Without a trace, without a story, without anyone asking questions she didn't want to answer. That Tuesday night, the ER doors blew open and stayed open, rain sheeting in sideways as 4 men in tactical black stepped through. Weapons slung low but visible, body armor slick with water. The waiting room went silent. A woman clutching her son's hand backed toward the wall. Dr. Voss froze mid-sentence, his clipboard hanging forgotten at his side. The security guard near the entrance reached for a radio he suddenly understood would do nothing at all. The lead operator, broad-shouldered, jaw set, scanned the room with the flat, practiced calm of someone who had walked into far worse than a hospital lobby. His eyes moved past the frightened onlookers, past the doctor, past the reception desk, and stopped on the nurse standing quietly by the supply cart, her hands steady, her expression unreadable. He took 2 steps forward, close enough that the rain still dripping from his jacket spattered the tile between them, and said 2 words that would end Maren Calloway's anonymous life forever. "Hi, Ghost." A red dot of confusion and dawning fear rippled through the room as the other operators lowered their stance, not in aggression, but in something closer to reverence. Dr. Voss opened his mouth to object, to reassert some control over a room that had just been ripped out from under him, but nothing came out. The man in front of Maren extended his hand, slow and deliberate, the way you offer respect to someone who once saved your life and never let you properly repay it. "You don't remember me," he said, "but I remember you. Fallujah Corridor, 4 years ago. You kept 3 of us alive when command had already written us off as Kia." Maren's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only crack in the composure she'd worn like armor for years. She took his hand and shook it, firm, brief, professional, the handshake of 2 people who understood exactly what the gesture cost each of them. "You're not supposed to know that name," she said quietly, low enough that only he could hear. "We're not supposed to know a lot of things," he replied. "But we need Ghost. Tonight. Not the nurse. The operator." Behind the reception desk, a call had already gone out, not for hospital security, but for something far above their pay grade. Sirens converged outside, not ambulances this time, but a convoy of black SUVs that pulled up with an unnatural, disciplined precision. And through the rain-blurred glass, distant rotor blades thumped against the low clouds, growing louder, closer, unmistakable. A helicopter was inbound, and it wasn't for a trauma transfer. Every nurse and doctor in that ER, people who thought they knew Maren Calloway, who had shared coffee with her in the break room and complained about the same impossible schedules, now stood frozen, recalculating everything they thought they understood about the woman in maroon scrubs. Dr. Voss, still gripping his clipboard like a life raft, finally found his voice. "Someone want to explain what the hell is happening in my ER?" Nobody answered him. Because the answer wasn't his to have, not yet. The lead operator's radio crackled, a voice cutting through with urgency that silenced even the ambient hospital noise. Windfall is live. Repeat, Windfall is live. We need Ghost wheels up in 6 minutes. Maren's eyes flicked toward the exit, toward the helicopter spotlight now sweeping across the parking lot. And something shifted in her posture. A transformation so subtle most people would have missed it entirely. Her shoulders squared. Her breathing slowed. The tired air nurse dissolved. And in her place stood someone the room had never met. Someone whose hands had done things no one at St. Perpetua could have imagined. If a story like this makes your pulse quicken, if you want to know exactly who Maren Calloway really is and what Windfall means, hit that subscribe button right now, because Chapter 2 is about to answer every single one of those questions, and you will not want to miss a second of it. She turned back toward Dr. Voss, the man who had underestimated her for 3 straight years, and for the first time since she'd walked through those doors as a civilian, she let him see it, just for a moment, the weight of who she truly was. "I need you to cover my shift," she said calmly, already reaching for her jacket. Voss stared at her, then at the operators, then at the helicopter now touching down beyond the ambulance bay, its rotor wash flattening the rain into horizontal sheets. "Cover your... Who are you?" Maren didn't answer. She simply walked toward the doors the tactical team had blown open minutes earlier, Ghost reclaiming her name one step at a time, while behind her, an entire hospital staff stood in stunned silence, finally beginning to understand that the quietest person in the room had always been the most dangerous one in it. The Black Hawk's rotor wash tore through the ambulance bay as Maren crossed the wet pavement, her scrubs plastered against her, her expression unreadable to everyone watching from the ER doors except the operators who now understood exactly who they were looking at. The team leader, callsign Pharaoh, fell into step beside her, shouting over the engine noise. "Windfall is a hostage extraction gone sideways. Senator Holcomb's daughter and 2 embassy staff, holed up in a chemical distribution warehouse 40 miles east. Local PD has a perimeter but no entry plan. And our unit medic went down an hour ago. Compound fracture, can't move." Maren didn't break stride. "Who's leading?" "You are," Pharaoh said, and for the first time all night, something like relief crossed his face. The relief of a man handing an impossible problem to the one person he trusted to solve it. She nodded once, climbed into the helicopter, and the doors of St. Perpetua Medical Center shrank behind her into the rain, along with 3 years of a life built entirely on nobody asking questions. Inside the Black Hawk, the noise was deafening, but Maren's mind had already gone somewhere colder and clearer, the place she used to live before quiet became a habit instead of a disguise. Pharaoh handed her a tactical tablet showing thermal imaging of the warehouse, 12 heat signatures, 3 clustered in a back office that matched the hostage's last known position. The rest spread through the main floor in a pattern that told her everything she needed to know about how this would go wrong if they went in loud. "They've got the building wired," Pharaoh shouted. "Chemical drums, det cord along the support beams. One bad breach and we lose the hostages and half a city block." Maren studied the layout, tracing a route with her finger that avoided every drum, every beam, every eye line from the main floor. "There's a loading dock on the northeast corner. Service corridor behind it leads straight to that office. If your intel's right about the guard rotation, we have a 90-second window every 6 minutes." Pharaoh looked at her like a man remembering exactly why they called her. "Ghost, you memorized the schematic in 90 seconds. I had 91, she said, already checking the aid bag someone had shoved into her hands, muscle memory taking over as if 6 years had never passed. They fast roped onto a rooftop 2 blocks out, the city lights below smeared by rain, and moved through back alleys with the kind of silence that civilians never learn and operators never forget. Maren led, not because rank demanded it, but because her instincts, dormant for 3 years, had woken up sharper than ever, every sense recalibrated to a world she told herself she'd left behind for good. At the loading dock, she counted the guard rotation exactly as predicted, 90 seconds, not a moment less, and the team slipped through the service corridor in total darkness. Inside, the air smelled of ammonia and fear, and through a cracked door she could see Senator Holcomb's daughter, barely 20, sitting on the floor beside two terrified embassy staffers, hands zip-tied, eyes red from crying but alert, still fighting to stay calm. Maren held up a hand, freezing the team, and studied the single guard posted inside the office, weapon slung, attention on his phone rather than his prisoners, the kind of mistake that separated survivors from casualties in this line of work. She moved first, alone, because two bodies in that doorway doubled the noise and the risk, and dropped the guard before he registered she was in the room, a controlled, silent takedown that spoke of a training regimen no ER nurse would ever need. The hostages flinched, and Maren immediately dropped to their eye level. Her voice suddenly gentle, the same voice she used on frightened patients in triage. "My name is Maren. I'm a nurse and I'm getting you out of here. I need you to breathe with me and stay quiet. Can you do that?" The senator's daughter nodded, tears mixing with rain-damp hair, and something in Maren's calm seemed to steady all three of them at once. Medical instinct and combat instinct fusing into the same steady hands. She cut the zip ties, checked each of them for injury with practiced efficiency, and guided them toward the service corridor just as gunfire erupted from the main warehouse floor, Pharaoh's team engaging the remaining hostiles to buy the extraction window. The firefight lasted 90 brutal seconds, exactly the length of one guard rotation, and when it ended, Maren was already moving the hostages up through the loading dock toward the extraction point, her body between them and any remaining threat out of an instinct that had never actually left her, only slept. The Black Hawk touched down in the warehouse's cracked parking lot, and as Maren loaded the last hostage aboard, Pharaoh grabbed her shoulder, shouting something that barely carried over the rotor noise. "Command wants to know if Ghost is willing to come back. Officially this time." Maren looked back once at the burning warehouse, at the rain finally beginning to slacken, at a life she'd built in careful, deliberate anonymity now completely unraveled in the space of 2 hours. She thought of St. Perpetua, of Dr. Voss and his clipboard, of the patients who needed a steady hand in triage far more often than the world needed another operator. "Tell Command I already have a job," she said, "but I'll always answer when it's this kind of call." 3 days later, Maren Calloway walked back into St. Perpetua's ER in her maroon scrubs as if nothing had happened, and for a while nobody said a word, though every glance lingered a beat too long. Dr. Voss found her in the break room, set 2 cups of coffee on the table, and sat down across from her without his usual clipboard, without his usual authority. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. 3 years, and I never once asked who you really were." Maren wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, the same hands that had carried a senator's daughter out of a burning warehouse 72 hours earlier. "You didn't need to," she said. "That's kind of the point." Outside, the ER carried on exactly as it always had, gurneys rattling, monitors beeping, the same tired fluorescent hum. Except now, everyone who worked beside her understood that the quietest person in the room had always been carrying the weight of 100 people she'd saved and would never talk about. If the story moved you, if you believe the quiet ones are often the strongest ones, subscribe to this channel right now because more stories like Maren's, hidden heroes hiding in plain sight, are coming, and you will not want to miss what comes next.